And that, my friends, is how America was made great once again. Breaking at this hour, Jimmy Sengenberger is currently at the crossroads of politics and economics. Radio broadcaster master, now the celeb on the web. He's the smarty of the party. He's in cahoots with the grassroots. Jimmy at the Crossroads brings you thought-provoking commentary, hard-hitting interviews, original satire, and the best bumper music known to man. Jimmy at the Crossroads!
Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics. Great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix, I said. Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics. Great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix. I got Jimmy at the Crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. People want answers, they want to understand. They come to the crossroads and Jimmy gives them the plan. I said, gonna talk money, gonna talk politics. Great for all generations, oh what a great mix. I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. Come on, Jimmy, what you got? Policy and markets, elections, current events. The broadcast master tells us how to win. I said, policy and markets, elections and current events. The broadcast master shows us how to win. I got Jimmy at the Crossroads, making sense out of nonsense.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to another edition of Jimmy at the Crossroads. Thanks so much for your patience today. Coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. Day in and day out, bringing you engaging, intelligent talk, saying style, and doing our level best to make sense out of nonsense. So great to be with you today. In a little while, we should be joined by Dr. Rob Margesson, professor at Regis University in Denver, Colorado, to talk about what's going on with higher education right now amidst coronavirus, where students are having to be taking classes from home and so forth. And then afterwards, once we get to the next school year, what are things going to be like for young people across the country who are in college or going into college, especially freshman orientation, so on and so forth. What are the dynamics like? Dr. Rob Margesson will talk about that. He is chair of the communications department at Regis University, which just so happens to be my alma mater. We will be joined before him by Dr. Jeffrey Singer, a senior fellow at the Cato Institute, to talk about the role of the Food and Drug Administration in improving medications based not on efficacy standards, but focusing on safety. First, though, there was quite something yesterday. Quite a feat in Lansing, Michigan, where there was a massive protest called Operation Gridlock. And we may need to pull some of the cuts here from that Operation Gridlock to show a little bit of what happened, what went down. In particular, I'm looking for cut one. And that one, what it does is it shows a little bit from a news story. This is WNEM TV5 in Michigan. And it shows a story of what happened yesterday. And then in a moment we will get to a Michigander, my friend Randy Schaffer, who is the founder of the America 101 Project. We'll get to him in just a moment. But let's first watch what happened yesterday. It was really quite something.
I was laying in bed tripping, just really bummed out about what was happening and praying, and God just kind of put on my heart, go up to Lansing, make a physical presence.
Anthony DiMaggio is a small business owner who worked with the Michigan Conservative Coalition to make this protest, known as Operation Gridlock, a reality. thousands of people came to the state capitol to protest Governor Gretchen Whitmer's Stay Home, Stay Safe executive order. DiMaggio says Whitmer's actions have left a lot of people just like him out of work.
We've had enough. So we're practicing what you see is our right to express our heartfelt feelings. We want to get back to work.
And other people we talked to who attended today's rally tell us it's time for all of Michigan to get back to work, not just so-called essential workers. After all, they say, everyone needs a paycheck.
The people of Michigan will not put up with their rights taken away.
Bills don't stop. My credit is good and I want to keep it that way.
If I don't make money, my family doesn't eat.
And as you can imagine, these protesters want Whitmer to get the message.
We all just want to work, and it's just about time that, for whatever reason, Governor Whitmer isn't getting it. It's time to get it.
Reporting in Lansing, James Felton, WNEM, TV5.
Very interesting what went on yesterday with Operation Gridlock. I have some thoughts on it, but let's go to a man who lives in Michigan. Randy Schaffer, founder of the America 101 Project, joins us now here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Randy, my friend, hello and welcome to Jimmy at the Crossroads on this Thursday, April 16th. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. Thanks for joining us. So I don't think you were at the Operation Gridlock, but it seems like thousands of cars maybe, people also in the streets protesting. What's your sense for what went on? I know you've talked with a lot of people.
Was there said that.
Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. And a friend of mine who was there said that the state police estimated about 10,000 cars were there. Now, many of them could get nowhere near the Capitol, but I could see on Michigan Avenue, which is the street that runs up to the Capitol, that the cars went back for what looks like miles.
That's astounding when you think about it. So it was cars, and then we saw people who were out and about as well, which I think was a little dicier, especially when we're talking about, I was seeing footage where people were definitely not being socially distanced at those protests. We'll get to that in a moment. But in terms of the outrage, clearly, that a lot of Michiganders have, is it specifically and solely towards the idea of the economy being shut down? Or is it because of some of the draconian policies that she's put into effect, like you can't buy gardening supplies and other things? Governor Whitmer, to be clear. Yeah.
Yes, that especially. I think it really hit home for some people that I know, and for me also, when I cannot hire somebody to come in the medians and around the streets. Now, 3 major cities in this area decided, and they're all Democratic cities, decided to override the Governor Whitmer's ban on that yesterday, and are now allowing for people to hire grass cutters. That there's going to be reptiles in the grass and rats and things that can cause disease.
And by the way, you're cutting in a little in and out there for some reason, Randy Schaffer. But in terms of the concern here, what are some of the deep restrictions on people's ability to even buy products at stores that Governor Gretchen Whitmer has been putting into effect in Michigan?
Well, for example, you can buy lottery tickets, and you can buy liquor, and you can buy pot, but you can't buy seeds to plant a garden. You can't buy paint to paint your house or do any kind of improvements like that. Like the rest of the state, other than those 3 cities, you cannot hire somebody to mow your lawn, even though the government's lawns get mowed. Little things like that. Oh, and another one is that you can go on your boat as long as your boat doesn't have a motor. If your boat has a motor, even if it's docked on your property and you're the only one in it, you cannot go on it.
That makes absolutely no sense as far as reasoning is concerned. Let's show a little bit of footage here. We have some footage from a drone of Operation Gridlock, as it was called yesterday, where you had a heck of a lot of people who were out there in their cars just clogging up the streets. Now, there is some outrage about the protest in and of itself, Randy Schaffer, because you had people who were saying, look, you're putting other people's lives in danger, especially for those we see. They look like ants, when you look at the drone. But you see a lot of people out there congregating physically outside. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think a little too much on that end, actually.
You mean in terms of the number of people who were out and about physically walking?
That we're not wearing masks and we're not social distancing, yes.
Yeah, so why do you think they were doing that? Was that just kind of to snub the governor and say, we're going to take things to this full level?
That would be my guess, but I don't think they're using their heads when they do that. The protest, the way it was set up and the way most of the people did it, was perfect. That was exactly what we should have been doing. But she doing that gives her ammunition and gives people who are fine with being locked down in their houses even for the next 18 months, it gives them ammunition. And I'm catching a lot of flack from people who are very mad at me right now because they think that people like us are going to cause them and their families to die.
Well, I would think that there is a distinction between those people who were showing up in their cars, in their automobiles, as opposed to those who were walking out and about.
Yes, I agree.
So, Randy Schaffer, when we look at what's happening in Michigan, it seems like you're getting to a point where people are really boiling over, especially because it's not just that their jobs are not able to happen, they can't go to work, the economy's shut down for the most part, but it is going again to the point of the products that you cannot buy, the idea that you cannot get gardening equipment, for example. You cannot buy a car seat unless they fixed it. As of the other day, you couldn't buy a car seat for your child under the age of 4, which, by the way, is required by law. What is Governor Whitmer's rationale for that?
Okay, I don't know what her rationale was for the car seats, but I do know what made national news, and she rescinded that and she made the order, and they were not supposed to rope off car seats.
Huh. Interesting.
Whether I believe that or not, I don't know, but she had to come out and say something because she was catching a lot of heat.
Yeah, you know what? Can you actually repeat that because you cut out a little bit? I knew what you were saying, but can you repeat that?
Yes, she made Governor Whitmer when she had all that stuff banned, and basically what she did was any Walmarts or any place like that sells food and medicine and electronics and whatever, car seats and everything else. She said you can sell food and medicine, but we want you to cordon off the rest of the store so nobody can go in them. And in the middle of what's cordoned off is the car seats.
Right.
That made national news. That made her look really bad. And she decided to go on TV and say, I did not mean car seats, and those stores misunderstood.
Well, that is really striking of what's happening right now over in Michigan. Governor Whitmer, I think, has gone beyond the idea of certain draconian policies into more of a tyrannical sort of approach. There is a big concern, too, about civil liberties in general. Let's go to Cut 2 here. This is Judge Andrew Napolitano, senior legal analyst at Fox News, and I thought it was pretty striking. I think it was last night when he was on with Tucker Carlson and had this to say about threats to civil liberties.
You know, one of our colleagues sent me a cartoon of the framers signing the Constitution, and in this cartoon, Washington turns to Madison and says, let me get this straight. None of this counts if people get sick, right? You know, sort of a humorous way of mocking what's happening today. Your analysis of Governor Whitmer could apply to nearly all the remaining 49 governors who assume that they have the power to crush individual liberties, violate the Constitution, and write laws. Well, they don't. Laws in this country are written by legislative branches after public hearings and debates, so there's a transparency. So we would know why she doesn't want you to buy garden hoses. There'd have to be a rational basis articulated for it. But when the executive branch takes upon itself the role of not just enforcing the law, but of making up new ones, and when in the process it crushes basic fundamental liberties like the right to travel and the right to worship, never mind on Easter Sunday, but on any time you want to worship, we are witnessing the slow death, the death in slow motion of civil liberties, because these governors, these petty tyrants, will use this power again and again until some courageous federal court or an outraged public stops them.
Final question for you, Randy Schaffer, founder of the America 101 Project, and thanks for joining us. What do you make of what Judge Napolitano said? And then also, In terms of striking a balance between public health and then the economic well-being of people, which does tie in, as I've said before, to public health and also, of course, civil liberties, how do you think policymakers like Governor Whitmer and beyond should be looking at striking that balance? I don't think, the one thing I think that was a drawback to yesterday's Operation Gridlock protest are the people who were out on the streets literally walking out and about. I think that that didn't help the case of the protesters very well compared with those who were in their cars.
I agree, and I agree with Andrew Napolitano 100%. Also striking is from that exact same show, Tucker Carlson interviewed the governor of New Jersey, and Tucker Carlson asked him if he considered the Bill of Rights when he wrote his ban, and the governor of New Jersey said, I didn't consider the Bill of Rights at all.
Right,
I only considered keeping my people safe.
So how do you strike that balance, in your view?
In my view, the balance needs to be struck with a lot of things that they are trying to ban are common sense, but they should be suggestions, not laws, because the governors don't have the authority to make those laws. And let the people act responsibly and do what they're supposed to do, and let businesses do what they're supposed to do. In any way, because the worst thing they could ever for business is somebody getting sick and dying in their business.
Sure.
Or
All right.
because of going in their business, it would put them out of business.
Randy Schaffer, founder of the American 101 Project, thank you for joining us today. Very interesting. I hope that Governor Whitmer comes to her senses, at least in terms of some of the policies here, even if she's not ready, understandably yet, to open up the economy. Thanks for joining us, sir.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Bye.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back here on Jimmy at the Crossroads, we'll be joined by Senior Fellow at the Cato Institute, Dr. Jeffrey Singer, MD. He's going to join us to talk a little bit about the role of the Food and Drug Administration, especially amidst the controversy surrounding hydroxychloroquine and other potential treatments that could come about for COVID-19 patients. Then we should be joined by Dr. Rob Margesson, professor at my alma mater, Regis University, to talk a little bit about what's going on in higher education today and looking ahead out into the future. Keep it right here. It's Jimmy at the Crossroads in partnership with the Washington Examiner. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger.
We all have rules we have to follow. But what if you could have a direct hand in helping to write the rules that would impact your life or your business? I'm Jimmy Sengenberger. Let's talk about exactly that. There's a lot of talk these days about the Trump administration's efforts to deregulate the American economy. If you think about it, though, deregulation is actually a great thing because it unleashes the unlimited potential of each and every individual. But in a lot of cases, you actually find folks advocating for more regulation, and frequently those people are the ones who will benefit most from the regulation. Such as big businesses like Facebook or General Motors that, if you put in more regulation, would be able to cut out the competition or directly benefit them. For example, putting up higher barriers to entry so that next small business, the next Mark Zuckerberg, won't really be able to get in on some of the action, some of the incredible opportunities. For example, last year we had the data privacy scandals for Facebook. Well, Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Facebook, went before Congress and testified before a Senate committee.
I think the real question, as the internet becomes more important in people's lives, is what is the right regulation, not whether there should be or not.
But you as a company welcome regulation?
I think if it's the right regulation, then yes.
You think the Europeans have it right? So would you work with us in terms of what regulations you think are necessary in your industry?
Absolutely.
Okay. Would you submit to us some proposed regulations?
Yes, and I'll have my team follow up with you so that way we can have this discussion across the different categories where I think that this discussion needs to happen.
Look forward to it.
Now, what did you notice in this video? You had CEO Mark Zuckerberg say that he supports the right regulation, and a United States senator actually asked him to provide some sample regulations to potentially help write the regulations. Big businesses tend to support more regulation because it hurts their upstart competitors, say the next Mark Zuckerberg. That's why General Motors CEO Mary Barra has been advocating for a brand new effort to regulate in advance of the interests of battery-powered cars, which makes perfect sense because Mary Barra has actually begun moving forward with GM toward an electric-only future. So what you have here are big businesses having seats at the table day in and day out to help increase regulations to the disadvantage of smaller competitors. That's a case for less regulation, not more. And it's a message we can get across to millennials today, who are the most innovative generation, perhaps in history. That is a message we need to get across as well. So let's boldly proclaim it.
We interrupt this program for a very important presidential message.
I have an issue that's very important right now to the American people and to the people of the United States as well. Our jobs are disappearing to Mexico. I'm going to change that in 2021 when I'm reelected. These jobs are gone. Even the Keebler Cookie Company is no longer, it's in Mexico, folks. It's down in Mexico so far. And those elves are out of a job. Our elves are out of, they don't even speak Spanish. They can't go down there, and they have Mexican elves down there now who don't even understand English making these cookies. I'm going to read the new ingredients just so you're interested. Honey, check. Wheat, check. Oats, check. Sugar, of course. But here's where it gets strange. Chicharrones. What's chicharrones? Jalapeno peppers, folks. If you try these cookies, you're going to burn your tongue off. It'll be gone. You'll have nothing. You won't be able to speak Spanish or English or any other language. Well, I'm going to bring those elves back so quick and so much. They're going to love it. You're going to have your cookies back, and your tongue's going to be fine, believe me. Trump 2020, thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome back your host of the Crossroads, Sengenberger.
Welcome back to Jimmy at the Crossroads. Great to be with you today here in partnership with the Washington Examiner. Pleasure and a privilege as always. Coming up in a little bit, we will be joined by Dr. Rob Margesson, Ph.D., Communications Department Chair at Regis University here in Denver, Colorado, from where I am broadcasting. Regis just so happens to be my alma mater. We're going to talk with Professor Margesson about what's happening across the country right now vis-a-vis higher education, dealing with the coronavirus crisis, and then once school comes back in the fall, what are the institutions of higher ed, colleges and universities preparing for? But first, I want to go back, take you back to the 1970s. There was a great show called Free to Choose, hosted by the great late economist, free market economist, Milton Friedman. I want to play a clip from one of those episodes, which has resonated with me for quite some time now, in terms of individual liberty and the doctor-patient connection and privilege when it comes to medical decisions, and especially your ability to access prescription drugs. Take a look at this. This is from the 70s, but it still applies today, perhaps even more so.
The implications for the patients are that therapeutic decisions that used to be the preserve of the doctor and the patient are increasingly becoming made at a national level by committees of experts. And these committees and the agency for whom they are acting, the FDA, are highly skewed towards avoiding risks. So there's a tendency for us to have drugs that are safer, but not to have drugs that are effective. Now, I've heard some remarkable statements from some of these advisory committees in considering drugs. One has seen the statement, there are not enough patients with a disease of this severity to warrant marketing this drug for general use. Now, that's fine if what you're trying to do is to minimize drug toxicity for the whole population. But if you happen to be one of these not enough patients, and you have a disease that is of high severity or disease that's very rare, then that's just tough luck on you.
It's no accident that, despite the best of intentions, the Food and Drug Administration operates so as to discourage the development and prevent the marketing of new and potentially useful drugs. Put yourself in the position of a bureaucrat who works over there. Suppose you approve a drug that turns out to be dangerous, a thalidomide. Your name is going to be on the front page of every newspaper. You will be in deep disgrace. On the other hand, suppose you make the mistake of failing to approve a drug that could have saved thousands of lives. Who will know? The people whose lives might have been saved will not be around. Their relatives are unlikely to know that there was something that could have saved their lives. A few doctors, a few research workers, they will be disgruntled. They will know. You or I.
So that's Milton Friedman back in the 1970s. I've been wanting to talk about this with Dr. Jeffrey Singer, who is a senior fellow at the Cato Institute, medical doctor, and author of a great piece just earlier last week entitled, "Doctors, Not Politicians Ought to Decide Whether Off-Label Drug Use of Hydroxychloroquine is Appropriate for COVID-19 Patients." Dr. Singer joins us now here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Doctor, welcome to the program. Such a pleasure to have you here today.
Pleasure to be here, Jimmy.
Thank you for joining us. So this is the reason why I wanted to highlight this, because of the hydroxychloroquine question. You hit the nail on the head in your piece, and I'm right there with you. I've been prescribed medications in the past, off book, that is to say a use that is different from what the original intention or proved intention is for, and I think that right should continue, whether it's hydroxychloroquine or other drugs, between the doctor and patient. Let's start there before we get to the question of the role of the FDA.
Sure. A lot of people probably are unaware of the concept or term off-label. But essentially, when a drug maker applies to the FDA for what's called a new drug approval, in the application, they have to state what they intend the drug to be used for. Once it goes through the lengthy process to get approved, and that could, on average, is about 12 years, the FDA allows it to put on the label the approved use. However, there's nothing that the FDA has no problems with clinicians using it for uses other than the approved use on the label. They defer to the judgment of clinicians, of course, who know their patients and in consultation with their patients, based upon what physicians are learning out there in the real world. Because every day, if you're a physician, you pick up a medical journal or go to a medical conference, almost everything that's being discussed is the efficacy of a particular drug to treat a particular problem. And we're always reading about or hearing presented to us reports about uses that a drug has for something other than its original intention. There are countless drugs like that. In fact, many people may know the famous blue pill by Viagra was not intended to treat ED originally. So doctors learn about these things, and then when they have a patient that has a problem who is not responding to the standard treatments, aware of this, they tell their patient, there have been a number of reports from credible sources that that drug, XYZ actually might help your situation. Would you like to give it a try? There's risks involved. I know about the risks as well, and you're supposed to tell the patient that. And then if the patient agrees, we do this. We do this all the time. In fact, according to the government's own data, about 20% of prescriptions written in the United States are written in this way. It's called off-label. And the reason it's called off-label is because the label doesn't say it's approved for use in that. So when you hear about, several reports from around the world that the drug hydroxychloroquine, which has been around for about 50 years, it's the brand name is Plaquenil. It's used to treat rheumatoid arthritis and lupus and several other connective tissue diseases, and it also can be used to treat malaria. Chloroquine is related to, and that's also used to treat malaria. So it's been around long enough that we know its risk profile. We know what to avoid, what drugs it interacts with, what the usual safe doses are. And then there have been numerous reports that using either of those drugs has been helpful if not curative, in treating COVID-19 infections. Now, I as a science-oriented person, I'm not willing to jump on board with that. I'm willing to say that's very fascinating, encouraging. I hope you're right. I'd like to see more data. I also, as a practitioner, I realize that, we practitioners are in a different, we're coming from a different place than the regulators and the researchers who do the approval process. So we're dealing with life and death decisions in the trenches. So when I have a patient,
we're talking with Dr. Jeffrey Singer of the Cato Institute Senior Fellow, cutting in and out just a little bit here on Jimmy at the Crossroads.
Even with,
Dr. Singer, you cut out very briefly.
Yeah.
Can you please restate the last 30 seconds? Yeah, you're better now. Thank you.
If I have a patient who's not doing well and I'm afraid I'm going to lose the patient, and I'm aware that there are numerous studies, mainly anecdotal reports and some small studies that suggest this may be a lifesaver for that patient, I'm ethically obligated actually to mention to my patient, I don't know if this is going to work or not, but I need to make you aware of this, and I'm willing to give it to you if you're willing to let me give it to you. And so I would do that myself. In fact, I would ask for it for me if I was in that situation based upon what I know, even though I cannot in good conscience say it's that I know it's going to work or not. Yeah. And that's called off-label use. Yeah. Now, like I say, the FDA has no problems with this. And unfortunately, this has become, when it comes to off-label use of hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine for the treatment of COVID-19, it's become political. And it's probably become political, unfortunately, because the president associated himself with it. And then it's kind of taken a red team, blue team kind of thing.
And Dr. Singer, I want to jump in right on that particular point because we have the FDA with such an expansive role, that leads to the potential for a politicization of these kinds of drugs, where you have politicians making a claim in one direction and then others in the media or politicians may say, oh, well, that guy likes it or is supporting it, therefore maybe we should be speaking out against this drug and we should be calling on the FDA to ban it, or governors or what have you, for this type of purpose. And it gets to the fundamental question that I wanted to talk with you about. And that is the role of the FDA and the government in making decisions on whether or not to allow a drug to market. And this one in particular, hydroxychloroquine that people are talking about, as you know, has been around for about 50 years, prescribed for other purposes. We know the safety profile for it, how safe it may be for certain people, and what have you. That is information that doctors can and should be able to use to make their own decisions on whether or not to prescribe it to a patient. Doctor-patient privilege, being able to communicate, make decisions between the two of you as opposed to having the government get involved. And it goes to the question of efficacy versus safety. It seems that people are saying the government should get in the way because we don't know that this actually is effective at treating coronavirus or COVID-19, even though we know that it's safe. And my view is the FDA at most should be involved in safety for drugs as opposed to efficacy.
Well, first of all, I agree with you on the last point you made, but it's also important to point out the FDA is not prohibiting doctors from prescribing this.
Absolutely.
Politicians are. We're seeing governors in numerous states pass executive orders saying you cannot use hydroxychloroquine to treat this and this disorder, which is an intrusion. First of all, it's a violation of the patient's right to medicate themselves to save their lives. It's also an intrusion on the practice of medicine. All of a sudden, politicians are inserting themselves into this. The FDA, to be fair to them, they're not prohibiting it all. They just haven't put it on their label that it's approved for that use because they don't feel ready to do that, which is fine. Now, getting to your other point, I agree completely. When the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act was passed initially in 1938, the mission was just to make sure that all drugs that came out were considered safe to give to the public. In fact, it was actually stated, if you look at the congressional record, the authors of the act said there's nothing in this act is intended to infringe upon the fundamental right of people to self-medicate. The intention of this act is just to make self-medication safer. So it was, I personally think that not allowing it because it's not thought to be safe, in itself is an infringement on the right to self-medicate. But aside from that, it was at least showing respect for the right to self-medicate, and it was only concerning itself with safety. Then in 1962, after the famous thalidomide scare, which you mentioned in your setup piece, where a drug not approved by the FDA yet, but approved in Europe and in use experimentally here in this country, thalidomide, which was designed to treat pregnancy, nausea in pregnancy, was found to cause these horrific birth defects. So in reaction to that, Congress added the Kefauver-Harris amendments, which to me, I'm still trying to understand why what they added makes any sense, because the FDA already hadn't yet approved it as being safe. And so now they added the efficacy requirement, which adds years to the approval process. So now once the drug is shown to be safe and the safe dosage range has been established through trials supervised by or overseen by the FDA, it next has to go through multiple years of trials to see how well it works. And the irony of that, not only does this deny a lot of people access to drugs that may be available to them in other countries already, and as Professor Friedman pointed out, how many people we don't see who died waiting for the drug to be available. But the irony of it is, according to the FDA, so let's say it's being evaluated to see if it has efficacy to treat condition A. And if it does, then it's finally approved to treat condition A. FDA's position is, once it's approved to treat condition A, we don't care whether doctors use it to treat conditions B through Z. We defer to their judgment, their analysis of the clinical literature and the research, and their knowledge of their patients. So the first question one asks is, well, wait a second. So if you trust my judgment on conditions B through Z, why did I have to wait on condition A? Why didn't you trust my judgment on A through Z? Why did my patients have to wait years before they can use this drug, if now you're telling me you trust me to use my judgment? So I would have, and of course, that kind of attitude gave birth to the right to try movement,
yes,
which resulted in the federal right to try legislation 2 years ago. But even then, in order to be able to, under right to try legislation, if it's proven to be safe, then you can have access to it, but only you have to be a terminally ill patient who's tried every other possible avenue, and you therefore have you can prove to everyone that you have nothing to lose. I don't think it should be restricted to that situation. I think we have a right.
And this gets to a very important point, which I think is fundamental and often discarded by Americans today, which is unfortunate. It's been the case for decades. I mean, things that you're saying were in the Friedman clip we played from the 1970s. I mean, we're like 40 years later or so, and it is crazy how much it's even gotten worse as opposed to better. But and again, we're talking with Dr. Jeffrey Singer, medical doctor and senior fellow at the Cato Institute. The doctor-patient relationship is sacrosanct, or so we hear. But when government wants to get involved because they think they know best whether or not to allow something to go onto the market, whether that is the FDA or it is governors who are using partisan politics to make medical intervention decisions, that means that the doctor and the patient are losing the ability to make their own decisions, or that we have lost the ability to make decisions. And that is a fundamental travesty for liberty, I think.
Yes, and not only, I excuse the FDA on the hydroxychloroquine one, but they're guilty, of course, of being subject to political pressure. Perfect example. For more than 20 years, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, as well as the American Academy of Family Practice, has been saying birth control pills should be available over the counter. And surveys show the majority of practicing physicians feel that way. Birth control pills are available over the counter in roughly 102 countries. Yet the FDA has not approved them for over-the-counter use. When it came to Plan B, which is the morning after pill, it took 14 years for that to be made available over the counter, even though on numerous occasions the FDA's own advisory boards overwhelmingly recommended it be made available over the counter. And that was because there was resistance from groups of people who felt that it would encourage sexual promiscuity and the like. So the FDA itself is subject to lots of political pressure. And now we have the ironic thing where, Plan B is available over the counter, but Plan A isn't. Can't understand that one. And the doctors themselves are saying, you shouldn't have to come to me to get a prescription for birth control pills because I don't think that's necessary. I think you could safely take them yourself. But there's another example. We're basically having political decisions control decisions that should be made individually by the patient in consultation with, obviously, with any rational person is going to want to seek advice from an expert before they put something into their body that can potentially harm them.
Mm-hmm. Again, we're talking with medical doctor Jeffrey Singer, who is a senior fellow at the Cato Institute. I want to ask you, before we let you go, doctor, about your thoughts on how the coronavirus pandemic is being handled from the government. I mean, a couple of days ago, we had the controversy over President Trump having said the president has total authority, but the next day he clarified by using language that fits in with the policies that his administration has been putting forward, which is the idea of national guidance from the federal government, but states and localities are able to make their own decisions on shutting down the economy or reopening the economy and those kinds of things, as opposed to having the big national plan. So what do you make of that, and what do you make of how states have been handling this from your medical position?
Well, I first of all, President Trump was obviously mistaken when he thought he had total authority. Our system, if President Trump said tomorrow, okay, the economy is opened, Governor Cuomo of New York could say, well, it's not open here in New York because that's the way our system works. And under the Constitution. But also, the federal government does have an important and legitimate role to play here. It mainly it should play the role of providing useful information, making sure, sort of almost like a quarterback, like making sure that all of the state and local governments have all the information available to them, providing logistic support, things like using the Army Corps of Engineers to build hospitals if necessary, moving material around if you need to move ventilators from one part of the country to another. Things like that are legitimate functions of the federal government, but most decisions really should be made on the local level, even from a public health standpoint, because demographic situations, geographic situations are not the same. One size does not fit all. So, for example, New York City has very unique situations to New York and the New York metropolitan area, where people live much more dense concentration. 50% of New Yorkers in the New York City area use mass transit as opposed to driving in their cars. They go into crowded elevators. And there's a lot more kind of international traffic. So you're dealing with a different situation than, say, in Arizona, where I'm speaking to you from right now, where people tend to be more widely dispersed, travel almost exclusively in cars, keep bigger distances. So and therefore, and that explains, by the way, to a great extent, why we're seeing case reports as well as case fatality rates differ from state to state. You have a state like California, which has 40 million people and has roughly, I think, 800 deaths right now, compared to New York State, which has nearly half of the deaths in the United States and less of a population. Now, people say that California, engaged in social distancing practices before New York did, but only a few days before. So that's not enough to explain it. I think there's a lot to explain. It has to do with differences in age of the population, lifestyles, demographics, et cetera. So really, these things are best managed on the local level, where the local public health authorities know what's going on there better. And it's also easier to quickly change and adjust to situations on the ground as they change, because you're dealing more locally with local knowledge, as opposed to having one best way that has to be imposed on everyone. And the other thing about that is, if there's only one way that's governed by Washington and it's mistaken, think of all the people who suffer. Whereas if a mistaken approach is taken by one smaller jurisdiction, fewer people are harmed by that. And not only that, there's ability for the various jurisdictions to learn from one another.
Well, a final question for you, Dr. Singer, actually, that comes to mind is what do you make of the declining projections? That is to say, we are still projected to see about 60,000 American deaths from coronavirus by August, which is a tragedy, to be sure. Every life lost from this is a tragedy. But at the same time, it's significantly less than the models were before, as we've actually been getting data that has been plugged into those models and revising them downward. So what do you make of that real briefly?
Well, that's the problem with models. As Dr. Fauci said, models are only as good as the assumptions you put in them. Yep. So in the beginning, we were putting in assumptions based upon the little information we had. And we still have a lot to learn, by the way. We still need to get more testing out there to really know more about just what is the fatality rate? Because right now our fatality rate is based on the number of cases reported, which is based upon people who have symptoms being tested, not even people who aren't symptomatic or being and therefore not being tested. So this is important when you make policy based on models. You need to understand that you're still flying by the seat of your pants because you don't know how accurate the assumptions are that you placed in the model. This should be a lesson for all kind of public policy, not just public health policy. But when we talk about models that have to do with other things, models are as good as the assumptions you put in them. And you got to be very careful that you don't make irreversible decisions based upon models, since they're subject to change.
Dr. Jeffrey Singer, medical doctor and senior fellow at the Cato Institute. So great to have you on this show. I'm sure we'll have you back. Really appreciate the conversation.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Be well and healthy, sir.
You too.
All right. Once again, Dr. Singer from the Cato Institute joining us. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we will be joined by another doctor, this time a PhD, my friend, associate professor at Regis University and chair of the communications department at the university that is based in Denver, Colorado. Rob Margesson will join us coming up to talk about what's happening, the current state of play, and what may be coming soon in higher education vis-a-vis the coronavirus pandemic. Should be an interesting conversation there. And then he's a leftist, self-described leftist. I want to get his thoughts on Bernie Sanders endorsing Joe Biden and how many Bernieites might be jumping on board with Biden or might not. So keep it right here. Jimmy at the Crossroads. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger in partnership with the Washington Examiner.
Hi, Jimmy. This is Bill Clinton calling your secret hotline here. I got to keep it down because I'm calling from the doghouse here in Chappaqua, New York, at our place. Don't even ask. All you need to know is she's on the warpath again. Oh, boy. Hillary yelled at me for listening to you. I have to do it in secret. But I really admire your show. I really do. I'm calling to wish you the best. All the best. In the future and even right now. Oh, here she comes. Listen, I got to go, but you got a great show, and you're going to do very well in the future, I'll tell you that much. Oh, my God, I know it's going to happen. She's going to have me read chapters of her book again. Put us both to sleep. I know what the title of her darn book should have been. Should have been called How I Dropped the Ball on the 2-Yard Line with 3 seconds left in the Super Bowl. I got to go.
Who's there? What do you want?
Hello, Donald Trump. It's me, the Easter Bunny.
Have a seat, have a seat so much. Do you remember, Easter Bunny, when I did you a huge favor by eliminating those horrible carrot tariffs?
Yeah.
Well, now guess what? You're going to do me a huge favor by doing your normal Easter Bunny thing, whatever that is. Running around the world, planting eggs in the ground, but America first, please.
Okay, a couple of things. First of all, I hop around the world. I don't run. And second of all, I don't plant the eggs. I just hide them.
How do they come to full maturity then?
Well, you hard boil them.
That seems a little cruel to me. I don't,
Well, I'll tell you what you can do. Why don't you just pardon them like you do the Thanksgiving turkeys?
It's a different thing.
The third thing. How am I going to get around the world, Mr. President? The travel ban's in effect. There's TSA to worry about. I mean, I got to get...
Consider it done. I'm going to use the War Appropriations Act to commandeer Santa's sleigh.
Good idea.
And there's nothing he can do about it.
Well, he might not.
Oh, you're worried about his elves.
The elves, yeah.
Believe me, if there is a stink, it's going to be boom, boom, out go their northern lights, believe me.
Oh, that seems kind of harsh.
Now, tell me something. When you hippity hop out of your tomb.
That would be Jesus.
Every year. And you see your shadow?
That would be Puxatawny Phil, the gopher.
That means there's 6 more weeks of the quarantine, isn't that right?
That would be Dr. Fauci.
You know something very interesting? The Easter Bunny. Most bunnies leave only white eggs.
There's only me, sir.
And that's wrong. I'm the least egg-cis man you'll ever meet. This year we're going to have all the colors of the eggs everywhere, every stripe. A panoply, a panorama, a rainbow. A rainbow of colors.
Yeah.
I want it to look like Walt Disney himself threw up.
Thanks for that visual. I think I can make that happen. Let me call my peeps. We'll get around the world before you know it, and Easter Sunday's going to be great again. Oh, and this year, Mr. President,
yes,
just as a favor, I promise not to smoke all the Easter grass.
That's a very good.
That's a little joke I got from Colorado.
I'm going to tweet that one, actually.
I'm out of here.
I'm tweeting it right now. Here I am. Oh, by the way, when you get to heaven, say hi to Half and the bunnies for me, please.
I really don't think that's the way it works, Don Trump, but I'll see what I can do.
America's politics are crazy. The culture is in flux. That's why we work hard to help you keep up.
More politics, more culture, and more access.
We focus on the biggest stories of the day with some of the biggest names in politics and punditry.
Go to our website, WashingtonExaminer.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
All right, folks, let's get you back for the final segment of Jimmy at the Crossroads, episode 25. It's your host, Jimmy Sengenberger.
Rocking and rolling back, Jimmy at the Crossroads. Great to be with you here on this Thursday, April 16th. Appreciate you being along for the ride here in partnership with the Washington Examiner on Jimmy at the Crossroads, where we work diligently to bring engaging, intelligent talk, Sang style, day in and day out. Once again, so great to be with you. Nathan Matoush, working the Matoush magic as producer extraordinaire. You can tell my mind's on our next guest that we're working to secure here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. But he has done great work. We're also appreciative of our friends at the Washington Examiner. By the way, if you have not done so yet, please subscribe. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, Jimmy at the Crossroads, youtube.com/Jimmy at the Crossroads. Also, the Facebook page is the place to go on Facebook to watch and follow all the content. Jimmy Sengenberger, media personality. Be sure to check it out and like it if you haven't done so already. Again, we go live day in and day out on there. Okay, not every day, but most days we go live and we do the show, and it broadcasts on the Facebook page as well as YouTube. So be sure to check those out. Also, follow me on Twitter at Sang Center. That's Sang with an E, not an A, Center on Twitter. And you can message me via email on the contact page at my website, jimmysangenberger.com. Remember, there's no A, there's no I, there's no U in Sangenberger. It's all E's all the time. Once you know that, Sangenberger is easy. So, for sure, be sure to contact me that way as well. Follow the Washington Examiner on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter. Lots of great content, good reporting, excellent commentary from our friends at the Washington Examiner. You know, one thing I'd like to do here, because we're still working to bring on our guest, Dr. Rob Margesson, professor at Regis University, if we have the cut of Nancy Pelosi just in the last, I think it was yesterday, and she was specifically asked about the possibility of having Zoom-based conversations or votes and what have you by Congress. Now, I think they'd have to change the law in order to make that happen, but she said something that I found very, very striking. Take a listen here to Nancy Pelosi. This is on MSNBC a day or two ago, and what she had to say about Zoom as she was dodging this question.
What do you call this now if not an emergency?
Well, it is an emergency, but what the distinguished leader was referencing in terms of urgency of passing a bill, we do think there is that urgency, but we have to get some agreement on the part of the Republicans that something the president will sign. We need that signature after all. But here's the thing, because you raise it and then you quote one thing that I said. What I said is we're giving task the chairman of the Rules Committee and the chairwoman, that would be Jim McGovern and Zoe Lofgren, chair of the House Administration Committee, the two committees of jurisdiction, to present options to us. What is allowed under the Constitution, under the rules of the House, what is possible technologically. But we haven't gotten to that. But on this Thursday, Jim McGovern will be making a report on what he sees as some of the options. People think we can do Congress by Zoom. Zoom is a Chinese entity that we've been told not to even trust the security of. So there are challenges. It's not as easy as you would think. There are other options of proxy voting and the rest, which other people tell me have constitutional problems. So this is not as easy as you might think.
Nancy Pelosi there saying that Zoom is a Chinese entity. Now, I'm looking here at Zoom Video Communications on Wikipedia. It is an American communications technology company incorporated in Delaware and headquartered in San Jose, California. It provides video, phone, and chat services through a cloud-based and peer-to-peer software platform. Eric Yuan, a former Cisco WebEx engineer and executive, founded Zoom in 2011 and launched its software in 2013. So this guy is someone who came here from China, yes. Chinese American. Eric Yuan came here in the 1990s. Looks like he immigrated to the United States in 1997 and joined Cisco WebEx. So, in other words, it's an American company. He's an American citizen. We're talking about an American company. Okay, he's from China originally. There may be vulnerabilities to Zoom when it comes to security, where Congress wouldn't want to use Zoom in particular. But it was so interesting that Nancy Pelosi, who's been very critical of President Trump and his criticisms of China and so forth, and hasn't been hypercritical of China's role in this virus originally and how it spread over time as a result of its generation, perhaps, in Wuhan, China, trying to hide the information from the public, spread disinformation around the globe and so forth. That Nancy Pelosi is saying, oh, Zoom's a Chinese company, so we shouldn't use it. First of all, she could use other software programs. Now, there are constitutional issues to remote voting. I grant that part where she ended, but it was kind of a non sequitur for her to say, well, Zoom, we've been told, is a Chinese company. Not true. Again, an American company, headquartered in San Jose, California, an American citizen. So it was a baseless argument for Nancy Pelosi to say that, and a dodge of the question, but so interesting where suddenly she's concerned in this context about China, and I find it, to be sure, very, very striking. But gosh, Pelosi playing politics there, trying to use some little way to say, we don't need to talk about Zoom and video calls because it's a Chinese company, which is false. But also, it is a baseless dodge of that particular question. All right, let's shift gears here to the topic of higher education. Colleges and universities across the country are dealing with tremendous challenges as far as coronavirus. It has resulted in students being sent home, faculty, staff, online learning, and more. Big changes. What does this mean for the future, too, when the fall semester begins, freshman orientation, and more? I'm pleased to welcome to Jimmy at the Crossroads the Communications Department Chair at my alma mater, Regis University. He is an associate professor there and also the Director of Forensics, the debate program at Regis University. Dr. Rob Margesson, Ph.D., joins us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads via the phone. Rob, sir, welcome. Good to talk with you, my friend. I'm sorry, Rob. We got you clicked up there. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Can you
okay.
hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you. Go ahead. Welcome to the show. It's good to talk with you.
Good to talk to you as well, Jimmy. How are you doing today on this?
You know, I'm doing pretty well. Now, how are you doing amidst the COVID-19? And then here in Denver, Colorado, of course, we've got snow, as you were just mentioning.
Yeah. I'm doing well. I'm locked in my house with a 21-year-old daughter and an 18-year-old daughter, and we have managed to go this far without a single fight or argument, knock on wood. So
impressive.
We're riding it out.
Most impressive.
Yeah, I know.
So how are they handling it? To bring us into the mind of a teenager and a 21-year-old in this era where they can't go out, they can't socialize, they can't be seeing friends, they got to be socially distant, maybe having phone calls, doing video chats on FaceTime and stuff. How are they handling it, your daughters?
Yeah, they're handling it surprisingly well. Luckily they get along with one another, so they have a built-in friend in the house, and they have a lot in common. And yeah, there's a lot of FaceTiming and various other technologies that I am unfamiliar with that they're using to kind of fill the time. And my oldest daughter, her boyfriend actually got COVID, so she hasn't seen him. He had an essential job. He was working in a grocery store, so she had to deal with that. But he's better now. She's happy. Good. So we're making it work. We're making it work.
Again, Dr. Rob Margesson is our guest, Associate Professor of Communications at Regis University, and you are plugged in, you have been very plugged in to academia all across the country, especially because as a debate coach, you have traveled around the nation, and a debate judge going visiting colleges and universities. What are things like right now at the college level?
They're surprisingly calm for the most part, I think, because they have to be for now. Most universities, I think, and Regis being an example, were smart enough to kind of build a week or even more off between when students had to leave campus and when online learning started. So, had they just kind of said on Friday we're going online and you need to be online on Monday, I think it would have been total chaos. But most institutions gave faculty a week to kind of get their course shells online and figure out to the best of their ability how to do assignments online and to hold classes online, which is an interesting thing to do. I'm learning. So I'd say, just in terms of, functioning, from what I can tell, and I'm part of a number of different online communities that are talking about this issue. Most folks seem to be getting by. At the same time, you're not going to be able to teach to your best ability in this situation with this so little warning. So I think a lot of professors across the country, and I definitely am one of them, have kind of had to revamp my expectations in terms of what I can ask the students to do, how much work I can assign them. So it's going smoothly, but I'm guessing that the students are not learning as much as they would in a classroom setting. And if this continues into the fall, which it might, then, hopefully professors will have the summer to build course shells online that are even more detailed and cover more of the material. But I probably cut 25% of my content out.
Okay. Oh, wow, that's striking. 25. It makes sense. Perfect sense that you would have to do that, especially when you can't present it face-to-face in class and have that same level of interactivity. We'll talk about the fall in a moment. But, Rob, when we talk about online learning and adapting to that, how are you conducting it? How are your colleagues, both at Regis University and other institutions of higher education around the country, handling that? Are you doing Zoom instruction? Are you doing where you make files available to students? How is that being done?
You know, everyone has their own way of doing it. I could speak to my way, and I can maybe give you an example of a colleague of mine as well. You know, my classes are very discussion-oriented. The content, I teach ethics, I teach free speech, I teach argumentation. Those are classes where, just standing up and giving lectures is not very common. So I've really had to adapt. We're meeting once or twice a week. We're using Zoom. And I'm, giving them a reading every week, which I've had to some of them were not readings I was originally going to do, but I've just had to find readings to supplement lost class time. And, once a week or so, I'll meet my classes as a group. We'll walk them through the readings, answer any questions they have, which is an interesting thing to do as well, because, with Zoom, if everyone tries to talk at once, it's a chaotic mess. And then I'm just giving them, a weekly assignment and a due date, and I'm holding an online or a couple online office hours every week. So I just say I'll be on Zoom at a particular time and day if you have any questions or just want to come in and talk about the material. So, that's how I've adapted. Students seem to enjoy this particular model. I think, not being forced to be in front of the computer all the time because of me, I think is something the students like, knowing that they can, see me when they want and see me when they can.
Sure.
But I have colleagues, my daughter, who's a Regis University student, she's got 4 classes she's still doing online, maybe 5. I should know that. But, and, some of her classes are, we are meeting at the same, we meet at Tuesday, Thursday, 9:30 to 10:45. There is attendance policy. I don't have an attendance policy during this. To me, that seems a little rough. We're meeting at our regular times. We're having attendance policies. The assignments are still the assignments that were due at the beginning of the semester. Office hours are still the office hours that they were at the beginning of the semester. So some faculty members, I think,
sure,
pretty much just took their class and moved it.
Got it. So when it comes to, obviously there's not on-campus living. Students were sent home, told you can't stay on campus at almost every institution around the country. And those students then were no longer in their dorms. They'd paid for those dorms. They'd paid maybe for lunch plans, meal plans. Have there been refunds giving out? What's your understanding of that process for Regis University in Denver and then other institutions around the country? Any insight into that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I will say that there are still a number of students on various campuses around the United States. Regis University, I don't want to throw out a made-up number, but there's still a decent number of students living on campus at Regis for a variety of reasons. For some students, they just can't pick up and leave. And my daughter's boyfriend lives on campus at Regis in an apartment with the same roommate. So some students are still there. But to answer the bigger question, one of my first concerns as a parent was I've spent quite a bit of money to pay for housing and food that my daughter's not eating. What are you going to do for me? And my understanding, I haven't seen the money yet, but Regis is returning, I think, around 30% of what I paid for my daughter's housing and food. And I'm hearing other universities around the United States are doing similar things. Looking at the calendar, seeing how much, what percentage of the semester was lost in terms of housing and feeding,
sure,
and then refunding that particular amount. It would be kind of suicidal to not give money back for those things. They can't really carry over into next semester. You can't be housed twice simultaneously to make up for lost housing. So,
sure. So,
yeah, but These are
Got
the type of things that are going to really hurt universities, is giving money back.
Sure. Dr. Rob Margesson, let's look out into the fall semester, especially for freshmen. I mean, let's say this does carry over. It's possible that it could well carry over into the fall semester. I hope not. Tell me how likely you think it is. But if that is indeed the case, how will universities handle this, do you think, especially when it comes to freshmen orientation, because that's an opportunity normally where students go to campus, they get into their dorms, they get to meet friends and find their way on the university, and maybe that's delayed to spring semester 2021.
Yeah, that's entirely possible. I would be guessing at the odds of it extending into the fall. My university, I had a meeting with our dean just recently, and he basically said, be prepared to teach in class and be prepared to teach online. Be equally prepared for both, because we really don't know. And even if we do start in the fall, it's entirely possible that this could flare up again, and we would get a month into the semester and say, nope, go back home. We're not ready for this yet. So that's a real possibility. I think a very frightening possibility, I think, for the parents of first-year students, knowing that their students might just up and get sent home again without much warning. And the universities, it's not even just orientation in the fall, but if you even look at this semester, this is a big, semester for recruiting, especially to, kind of private liberal arts colleges like Regis University. One of the ways we get students from other universities is to bring those students here in the spring when the weather's beautiful and the grass is green and the leaves are, nice and brown, and we walk them around our campus and show them all the buildings and, sell the university to their parents. And I know a lot of students at Regis that I've worked with over the years have told me that they weren't planning on going to Regis University until they came in the spring with their parents, and they saw, the small class sizes, and they saw the beautiful university, and they met faculty, and they talked to other Regis students. Yeah. So even this spring, recruiting was just really devastated by, and so much of our students, so many of our students come as a result of that recruiting. So, I don't know what the numbers are going to look like at Regis, and Regis, I would say, represents a lot of small liberal arts colleges. So it's definitely going to hurt recruiting and, probably cause a lot of students who might move out of state to attend a private university to stay closer to home and, either attend a private school near their home or attend a community college for a year to make sure that this blows over before they invest that time and energy into, private college, or in state colleges suffer as well, but not nearly as much. So
once again,
the numbers, who knows?
Sure. We're talking with Dr. Rob Margesson, Associate Professor of Communication at Regis University in Denver, Colorado, and also Chair of the Communications Department there. I want to shift gears because you mentioned free speech class, and I'm sure we'll have you back at a future point to talk about free speech on college campuses. But you and I have talked about this quite a lot, including on my radio show in Denver on 710 KNUS, but you're a self-described leftist. I am most definitely not. You know full well that I began my media experiences as a student at Regis University in 2008 at the height of what I call Obama mania, when I started a conservative political talk show on the radio station there. And I got a great experience, and I was able to do things that now I've talked with you, I've talked with students of yours, I've talked with other folks at Regis, I couldn't do today if I were a student on campus, and not because of coronavirus, but because of a decline in advocacy for free speech on college campuses. You are a free speech advocate. That's why you teach free speech. Tell us what you think the environment is like on college campuses at this point in America's history when it comes to free speech, especially conservative or libertarian-leaning views on campuses.
We've talked about this quite a bit. I always enjoy talking about this with you. I think the state of free speech on college campuses right now is college campuses are risk averse. I think administrators in particular are risk averse when it comes to bringing on speakers who might offend certain student populations. In my classes, talking to students, and it's a very small sample size, but I'll use it. A lot of my students, especially students who are in groups that would be considered marginalized groups, they're not as opposed to bringing folks on, conservative speakers in general. They're not opposed to having those folks come and talk. And I know some campuses they're more, social justice aggressive. Regis might not be as aggressive as others. But the students don't seem to be afraid of hearing those voices, but administrators are. I can tell numerous stories about speaking to different administrators about different speakers that want to come on campus and different student groups that want to bring those students on campus. And it's the administrators who say no. It's the administrators who are afraid that, certain student groups will get offended. It's administrators that are afraid there's going to be pushback. So I think we're just at a point now where it's easier for administrators to just say no to any, and I've noticed a significant decline, at Regis in recent years of speakers at all, not just, provocative or conservative speakers, but just, we used to have quite a few leftist speakers come, and I'm barely seeing those at all now. I mean, most of the speakers we're getting on campus are very, safe. They're talking about, lectures on the key to happiness or some, things that, no one can be offended by a lecture on happiness, right? And I use that example because I was in charge of putting that speaker together.
Okay.
Well,
let me jump in. Let me jump in for a moment, because what you're saying is interesting in terms of administrators being risk averse, even more so than students. But is it that they are fearful of the students who are outspoken on these kinds of topics, especially for conservative speakers, but also they decide, hey, maybe we shouldn't even get into controversial areas, which, by the way, are the most thought-provoking areas as well, when you have controversial speakers making controversial points and you have engagement with students and the speaker and what have you. But also, I think you and I have talked about, and you made mention before of the idea of minority students or more marginalized student groups that are more open to free speech, but in a lot of cases you can have white students who are not considered more marginalized groups who are the most vocally opposed to more conservative speakers going on to campus and expressing views. Tell us about that and tell us why that is.
Well, I can give you a small example of that. I taught my free speech class, not the one you visited most recently, but the class I taught before that. I had two black female students in that class, and then the rest of the class were at least presented as white, to my knowledge. And we got into this question of, would you feel comfortable with someone coming onto campus who maybe, is considered racist? And
considered by whom?
Two black students. Oh, well, just hypothetical, whoever.
Okay.
Let's say they have a reputation. It's a hypothetical here. The two young black women were fine with it, absolutely fine with it, and they actually welcomed the opportunity to engage with that rhetoric. But it was the white students in the class were very opposed to it, and their argument primarily was about protecting the very students, at least two representative students in my class, who said they're fine with it. My white students were, we can't do that. There's, marginalized students on this campus. It's going to cause stress and tension and fear in those communities. And it was kind of an odd juxtaposition of the two young black women saying, no, we don't need you to do that. We said we're comfortable with it. We're willing to engage. We want to listen. We want to argue back. So I think there's kind of a white savior complex around issues like this of, the white students feel like they're obligated to protect their marginal. It's not just race. That's just the example I use. But, these students feel like they are obligated to protect the marginalized people.
Protect them, shield them.
Oftentimes those students say, I don't want you to protect me, and I'm actually interested in engaging because, it's bringing speakers on campus. It's not just listening to speakers. I mean, if you go to any, speaking event on most campuses, there's Q&A after. There's opportunities to engage these speakers. So, these students who are being protected actually want to stand up at that microphone after that presentation and ask tough questions and engage in an argumentation with these people. I think that's one of the things that's lost.
Well,
an important thing that's lost.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree, as you well know, and I do appreciate, Dr. Rob Margesson, you having me speak to your free speech class just what was it? Last year? Was it 2 years ago now? Time flies. It all blends together. But whenever it was, you had me come and speak to your free speech class. A leftist professor bringing conservative talk show host onto campus because you value free speech, and this is something I've known about you since we became friends. I never had you as a professor, but I did. I brought you on my radio show at Regis and so forth. But I want to shift gears here because we're running out of time with our guest, Dr. Rob Margesson, again, associate professor of communication at Regis University and also director of the communications department there and in Denver, Colorado. I want to ask you a more political question. Let's play a snippet here. This is a couple of days ago, or a few nights ago, Bernie Sanders endorsing former Vice President Joe Biden for President of the United States. I want to take a listen here and then ask a very specific question.
So today I am asking all Americans, I'm asking every Democrat, I'm asking every independent, I'm asking a lot of Republicans to come together in this campaign to support your candidacy, which I endorse, to make certain that we defeat somebody who I believe, and I'm speaking just for myself now, is the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country.
So that's Bernie Sanders, a snippet of him endorsing Joe Biden. I'm curious your thought from the left. Do you think that the leftists, the further left elements of the Democratic Party will rally behind Joe Biden? Will they turn out to vote for him? Are they going to be enthusiastic enough to keep up that fervor, or is it just going to be rooted in enough hatred of Donald Trump? And are they going to be able to get that hatred flowing through them so that they go out and vote against President Trump in his reelection bid? Or I've seen a growing number of leftists, at least on YouTube, prominent people. Kyle Kalinski's one prominent left-wing YouTuber who's saying, I'm not going to vote for Joe Biden. Blame me, fine. Blame me if he loses, but you got to court my vote more in the future. What's the sense coming from the left here, Rob Margesson?
It's pretty evenly split right now. I mean, you say I'm a leftist, but compared to some of my friends, I'm downright conservative.
That's true.
I've been
True enough.
Extremely leftist fan. It's surprisingly, and again, I'm using small sample sizes here, but one of my, most leftist, socialist friends is really banging the drum for Biden right now. And he's using a similar argument that Bernie just made there. It's about removing Donald Trump from office. It's not about, ideology. It's not about getting our way. We just, we have to accept the fact that if we do not get behind Biden, the alternative is worse from their perspective, not yours. And so I'm seeing, quite a few of my friends who, were absolutely opposed to Hillary in the last election cycle, who refused to support her and vote for her, are starting to come around to maybe, we kind of shot ourselves in the foot last time. And so why don't we just kind of, bite the bullet here, vote for Joe, and see if we can't rally some other, socialist candidate for us in 2024. I'm also seeing, though, friends who are equally leftist who just say, hell no, I will never vote for an establishment Democrat. They're bow down to the same corporate masters that the Republicans do. I'm never going to support those people. So, I mean, it's early. It's early in this cycle. Will those people change their mind? I don't know. Will my friends who are supporting Biden right now begrudgingly, regret it and go back? I don't know. But I'm seeing from very, very leftist communities a split now. We got to do what we got to do, or no, the DNC screwed us again. We're not going to play that game.
I will tell you this, Rob Margesson, there's some resonance with 2016 and Republicans who said, I may not like Donald Trump very much, but I'm going to support him because I oppose Hillary Clinton strenuously and we need the Supreme Court justices. And guess what? Donald Trump has delivered on the Supreme Court. I mean, those were the number one and number two reasons, actually reverse that. Number one was Supreme Court. Number two was defeat Hillary, that I was supportive of President Trump in 2016. So there's some resonance here. The question is, will the leftists rally behind Joe Biden? As you say, there's a split. We'll see what happens. Dr. Rob Margesson, my friend, always great to check in with you. Next time, we'll make sure we can get you on camera, but thanks for joining us today here on Jimmy at the Crossroads.
Hey, good work on the show, man. I'm really proud of what you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And stay well and healthy. My best to you and your daughters.
Okay, take care, Jimmy.
Once again, Rob Margesson, professor at Regis University, my alma mater in Denver, Colorado, small liberal arts college, but the director of forensics there, and also very plugged in to colleges and universities across the country as he judges tournaments, travels around the country, all those good things. Fascinating insights, especially on what's happening in colleges and universities today, but also a strong free speech advocate, which I very much appreciate. That is it for us today here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Appreciate you being along for the ride. In partnership with the Washington Examiner, my thanks to Nathan Matoush, producer extraordinaire, for doing his work, working the Matoush magic here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Also, by the way, let me give some credit to our video guru, Corby Wise at VIP Video Productions. And of course, once again, thanks to the Washington Examiner, our partners here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Be sure to subscribe at youtube.com/Jimmy at the Crossroads if you have not done so already. Enjoy the day, stay well, stay healthy. We'll see you next time, and God bless America.